Marketers are really bad at talking to existing customers most of the time. We kind of suck at it because we're so used to trying to get the sale, trying to ask for the sale, right? It is ingrained in our souls that your goal is to get the sale, right? Or get it to sales. So then when we're talking about existing customers, most marketers are pretty bad at that.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Marketing in the Raw. That is the podcast, and I am the host, Adam Helway, and of course, I'm joined by my teammate, Deanna. And today, we have a guest who brings a wealth of experience in bridging the gap between marketing and customer success. Who are we talking to today?
That's right, Adam. Today, we are talking to Marley Wagner. Marley's one of those rare people who's mastered both sides of the equation: fractional CMO and digital customer success consultant. Such an interesting amalgamation that her career has brought her to. And she really knows how to not just attract customers, but then on that customer success side, turn them into real advocates for your brand. So I just really love how she weaved both sides of the coin. And I found it so interesting. And what really caught my attention in the episode was her take on scaling those personal connections. Because she, like I've said, she knows both sides of the coin. So she gets how important it is to keep that personal connection, but she also understands the bottom line and how it's important to scale it. Something we all struggle with. And she really shows us how to use that automation without losing the human touch, which, let's be honest, that's the holy grail, right?
Yeah, it was interesting as we were talking, because most of the conversations we have around marketing almost always are talking about, the early stage, generating customers, bringing those customers in. But Marley, she's bringing the knowledge around how big of an impact you can have as a marketer on the customer success side. And to your point, in a world where we're talking about AI and automation, and I ask her this, I want to dig into it a little bit. How do you make sure that you're still bringing the important element of the human touch and the human interaction, but leveraging emerging in new and not even sometimes new technology, but technology has been around for quite some time, to scale those touches so that they're really still timely and useful for driving customer success. So,
Yeah.
As usual, the episode is filled with lots of great information. I always enjoy talking to Marley, and this time I got to record it so that I can share it with you all. So let me introduce my interview with Marley Wagner. How you doing, Marley?
How are you?
I'm doing all right. I am doing all right. I'm so happy to have you join me. You're one of the smartest folks in marketing that I've talked to in quite a while. And I want to know even more about you than I already do. I'm talking to you. You shared with me you're out there in Colorado, and I know from my brethren out in Colorado that you're getting hit by the little bit of snow today, the cold that's been moving through there.
Yeah, I'm peeking out my window over here. I think it stopped. It snowed last night, got a couple inches overnight. It was snowing this morning. I think it's paused, at least for now. But yeah, nice little winter wonderland out there today.
It'll resume after the podcast. Well, Marley, tell me a little bit about yourself. I don't know this. How did you get started in marketing? Were you destined to be in marketing? Was this in your future since you were 5 years old and they asked you in, kindergarten or whatever, what you wanted to be? You just said, I want to be a marketing leader. Is that what happened?
That's it, Adam. No, I mean, if you had asked me as a little kid what I wanted to be when I grew up, I wanted to be a fashion designer at one point. I was a theater kid. I was a singer. I wanted to be a performer for a long time. But I think relatively quickly in my teenage years and through college, I kind of found my way to marketing, right? Still has some of those creative components that were so interesting to me in those childhood dream careers. And so I went into marketing right out of college and have had the fortune of being a marketer in so many different industries, so many different company types. And I think that breadth of experience is really has been an asset to me throughout my career. So I'm really grateful for it.
When was the moment that you, like, do you remember anything that just sort of clicked where you were like, marketing is what I'm going to pursue when you went that direction?
So my major in college was, well, really poorly titled, actually, technically called retail merchandising, although there was only one retail specific class. I would really say it's like half a design degree and half a business degree. It was in the College of Design at the University of Minnesota. And so at some point during that, I was like, oh, marketing really seems to like fit these two sides of what I've been studying. This, again, that creative, but also, strategic and thoughtful and in some ways academic, sense of what marketers can do. That was also appealing to me. I loved that I could sort of use both sides of my brain. I'm one of those people who likes the creativity, but also likes the structure. So I think marketing just kind of fit that for me.
That's cool. So then, out of school, how did the career start?
So I really started in the event side of marketing. I actually worked for a nonprofit, my first job out of school, running very large scale events and marketing for those events. So we're talking about like an annual film festival, book readings by famous authors, those kinds of things, that I was bringing those folks in and, selling tickets to those events. Very sort of niche, unique marketing environment, certainly, nonprofit, like small budget, team of one, most of the time, all of that kind of stuff. But that really propelled, I think, some of the different directions that I've taken in my career, right? Worked in a couple different nonprofits in the arts, so still kind of sticking to my artsy side as well. And then moved over into the B2B space and now actually focus less so on sort of what we think of as traditional marketing of acquiring new customers and more so on existing customers, automation for existing customers and growing those customers and retaining them and all of that. So it's really been quite the evolution since the early days.
Yeah, for sure. Now let's talk a little bit more about that current picture. So you talked about what you're doing more in the B2B space. Describe that a little bit more, what you were just talking about with the existing customers.
Yes. So let's see. Back in 2017, when I first moved to Denver from Minneapolis, I took a job at a company called ESG. I like to describe them as a customer success agency, right? We're all familiar with the model of a marketing agency. They do that for customer success.
I'm not familiar with what a marketing agency is at all.
Not at all. You have no idea how it works.
No.
Zero. So they do that for customer success. And I came on as the head of marketing there. I was part of the team that founded this new version of the company. It was an existing company, and they were pivoting their value prop. We trademarked the term customer success as a service. And I also then both ran our corporate marketing as well as what we called our digital customer success practice. I really say digital customer success, scaled customer success, customer marketing, lifecycle marketing. There are subtle nuances, but the gist is really the same no matter what term you prefer. The one term that is not acceptable in my book for a synonym of that is tech touch, which some people still like. And I'm like, ew, gross. That one,
Never heard
that one
that.
doesn't count. That's more in the customer success world. I'm like,
Okay,
we're not doing that. But any of the other ones, I'm like, any of those synonyms are fine, right? So then I was running both, again, corporate marketing as well as this digital CS practice, helping giant enterprise B2B companies build out their automation strategies for increasing retention and growth with existing customers, right? So automation that complemented, one-on-one work that CSMs, customer success managers, were doing with those clients. But hey, how do we do that digitally? How do we augment that? How do we scale that? And now I'm doing that out on my own. I've been consulting and freelancing again in that same space, customer marketing, digital CS, for the last year or so now.
I want to go into your experience now as you're doing this on your own. But before I do so, could you give me an example of, you talked about automation there, and I think automation for some folks in their brain could be associated with stuff that's a bit more broad. Can you
Yeah.
give an example of what that looks like? Because customer success feels, anything with the word customer feels like it should be something that's very human. Automation feels like it potentially will remove some of the human element from that. So I want to hear what you think about that.
Yeah, so I think that's really the big challenge. There also is a big debate in a lot of companies about who should own that with existing customers. Should it be customer success? Should it be marketing? I actually am a strong believer that there is no one correct answer to that question. It can be either team. What's really important there is that both marketing and customer success are involved in deciding who the owner is and involved in building what that strategic plan looks like. Exactly to your point, because you don't want automation to kill personalization, right? You don't want to kill human interaction. So really how I think of automation with existing customers, I mean, you can compare it to sort of the sales and marketing duality that we think of pre-sale, right? Marketing is about digitally engaging, and sales is about having the one-on-one conversation to close the deal. Post-sale, you can think about it really similarly. Automation, again, about engaging digitally, connecting with those customers through digital channels. And it doesn't just like, a lot of times we're like, oh, that just means email. No, I mean like 50 million other things too, right? And I'll get into that list too. But then it, complements the one-on-one interactions that CFSMs are having. So those automations certainly could be email. That's typically still kind of a default, but I see a lot more companies moving away from that, and I'm really encouraging my clients to do so. Using in-app notifications, right? Products like Pendo or WalkMe, or even things that are natively built into your product, if we're talking about software, of, hey, how can we communicate with our customers where they already are? Well, where do you want them to be? In your product, duh,
Yeah.
right? Things like that, even, your community, your knowledge base, what is your support agent look like, right? What does that digital experience look like? How about webinars or office hour sessions or group implementation calls where it's not just one customer, but you have a cohort of customers that's all being onboarded at the same time.
Yep.
Even things that can be borrowed, from more traditional digital marketing, like really targeted paid advertising, SEO and SEM for your existing customers. Like, you don't necessarily think about those post-sale, but those strategies can be used really at any point of the customer lifecycle.
What is the key outcome that you usually are trying to impact there? Retention?
Retention and growth. Yep, exactly.
Okay.
So that's, it often has the same metrics as customer success, right? A CSM and a CS leader is typically measured on, NRR.
Yeah.
Is the big one there. And that is largely the same for customer marketing or digital CS. So that's one argument some people make, that it should live in customer success. But again, it doesn't have to. There also are all the engagement metrics that we typically measure in marketing, right? Are people opening whatever you're sending them, whatever channel it is? Are they taking the action you want them to take? Are they clicking? All of those metrics are things that need to be measured along the way to get to that ultimate goal of, increased NRR.
What's the sweet spot where a company should recognize that this is something they need to start addressing?
This is a hard question for me to answer, and it's because the company size is actually sort of a red herring in this, in my opinion. It's more about the maturity of your existing infrastructure, of your marketing team and your CS team. Like, hey, up until this point, is anything going to existing customers, right? Do they get anything from anybody, marketing or CS, or even like product, right? Is product sending their own product updates? What do those look like?
Yeah.
So it's more about like the maturity of the current org, not so much a company size question. It's like, hey, what's happening today? And have you hit that threshold where like you're sort of doing, I call it random acts of marketing to your existing customers, where like they're getting some stuff, but it doesn't have a lot of strategy or intention behind it, that's usually the trigger to be like, okay, like pause. We got to figure out like who owns this, what we're going to do with it, right? There's also sort of a threshold from a like CSM capacity and headcount perspective that you can hit where you're like, hi, I can't throw any more headcount at my existing customers based on the economics of, customer size. And that's different depending on what your, average annual contract value is and that kind of thing. So those are some of the things to look at, but there's not like okay, you crossed this dollar mark, like you got to do it.
Yeah, no, I figured that it's a lot like, I'm not going to say this correctly, but there's a number of folks that are like, okay, well, this is a solution that's for your technical documentation to do X, Y, and Z, and you have to have a product that requires technical documentation, and then B, enough critical mass of technical documentation to warrant a particular investment to do X, Y, and Z, right? Like that. So I figured it was very similar in that sense of you're going to want to obviously have a need for some customer interactions, but then from there have enough critical mass. Or I think what you pointed out was it's not just about the critical mass. It could be you could come in and absolutely help them understand like not just how to apply what you're talking about towards this critical mass of customer service interactions, but how to operationalize it properly so that it's organized. Because I could imagine from my experience that you have folks in their companies who are just like, let's just hire a person or three to just field this very haphazardly and in a really ad hoc way. And then eventually you being the professional that you are and knowing what you're doing would say like, yeah, there's a better way. And if you have one person, well, it may depend. Do you want that one person to have superpowers because they're just being augmented by all this stuff that absolutely should be available to be handled by all these more intelligent solutions that you're talking about? And that person can then focus on the things that really need the more high touch human elements, or what? So it feels like that's kind of what you're pointing out is it depends, but there has to be enough going on and to justify that investment. Do you care enough to invest into this for the sake of that retention? And is this going to help you do more with less from a human perspective, even, right? Again,
Absolutely.
Where people are able to focus on the human things with those humans and the other things with what you pointed out doesn't seem very unhuman. It seems like what you're trying to do is more smartly make sure that your customers have access to the things that they need in intelligent ways. If I were to
make more time for those strategic one-on-one conversations, right? If your CSMs are busy copy and pasting the same email to 200 customers, what are they not doing, right? What does that take away from that would be a better use of their time?
Yeah,
and I think the concept is like kind of trendy enough, if you will, in B2B spaces too, where some marketing teams are just like from above being tasked with like, hey, you now own post sale too, like go figure it out, right? Or vice versa, where customer success is like, oh, I have this retention problem and like I don't know why it's not working. And then you look at it and you're like, oh, because like half your customer base, all your customers that are under XYZ dollar value, like aren't talking to anyone ever and get nothing from you. Like,
yeah.
Right. So those are some other scenarios too.
What kind of, just to give us a lay of the land, what are some of the kinds of companies you've worked with over the last couple of years? Like what are the spaces that they're in and yeah.
Yeah, it really varies because the thing is everybody in the B2B space, right? I primarily focus on B2B companies, work with B2B clients. But everybody in the B2B space is trying to figure out how to do more with less right now, right? You just said that. Everyone is like, hey, my budget has been frozen, right? I haven't been able to hire anybody in 2 years, but I still have more customers than I did 2 years ago, right?
Yeah.
So like, how do I do this? So that everyone is in that boat together. So that means I have worked with companies that are really small. I've worked with companies that are like ginormous. Fortune 500, multi-billion-dollar corporations, a bunch in between, and in like just about every industry you can think of.
So that's cool. And so, what when you think back again around like the last 12 months or whatever, have you ever just walked in and somebody says, "Hey, I'd like to talk with you about this. Can you take a look at what we got going on?" And it was so obvious that somebody was not trying to think the right way to not throw anybody under the bus or anything like that. But like when you walked in, what was sort of like the most obvious? People were looking under the wrong rock. They were not paying attention to something. Maybe they were not reflecting on what was really going on right in front of their face because they didn't want to take responsibility for it. Like, what did that scenario look like? And what did you put into action to sort of help unravel that? Were people really accepting of those, of that guidance from you? Paint that picture a little bit.
Yeah, that's such an interesting question. Most of the time people have an inkling that they're like, hey, I need automation for my current customers, right? And again, whether that's coming from a marketing need because they've suddenly been tasked with this thing that they don't know how to do, right? Because marketers, like, I'm a marketer, so like no shade, but like marketers are really bad at talking to existing customers most of the time. We like kind of suck at it because we're so used to trying to get the sale, trying to ask for the sale, right? We have been trained, it is ingrained in our like souls that like your goal is to get the sale, right? Or get it to sales at least. Yeah. So then when we're talking about existing customers, like most marketers are pretty bad at that. So thankfully I think there's a level of humility there that they're like, hi, we need some help. We need someone who like does this. And on the CS side, they're like, hi, we're really good at this like one-on-one talking to each other thing, but like none of the technical stuff, none of the automation stuff, like that's just not the way CS leaders and CS professionals have come up. And so no matter which side you're coming from, you're like pretty aware of the gap. So thankfully that's been the case with almost every single one of my clients that I've worked with, where they're like, I need help with this. I don't know how to do it. You do. And then, sometimes there are opinions that exist that I hear and I'm like, yeah, no, like that's not going to work. Like we should just send them 1 million emails. Right. And I'm like, yeah, no, like email is going to be part of it, but like it can't be the only thing. Right. Like that's not, automation doesn't equal email.
Yeah. Well, it's even in talking with my team about the automation stuff that we do, being clear about even in our language, because it often gets, we talk about like, we've got to be careful how we communicate this because it can often be constituted as marketing automation, which almost always is just thought of as broadcast stuff, email, whether that's one-to-one or one-to-many, or, nowadays you obviously have things like, push notifications and SMS, but it's all still very much just notifying people and broadcasting. And so what you're talking about is finding that right mix for using the right channel for the right reason. I mean, you even talked earlier about like Walk Me and stuff, which I'm familiar with, right? Like that's in the product. I often think of, the touch points is you've got to think of what's the mindset that the individual is in at that moment. What is the moment, like the actual timing aspect of it, and then what's the medium that you're using for interacting with that person. And in the case that you're talking about, like Walk Me, is like the mindset somebody's in is I'm trying to understand how to use this product. I'm trying to understand how to use something in this interface or just get a lay of the land. I need that answer now. I don't need to wait for somebody from customer success to get back to me on it. There will be some of those instances where you'll use your little chat on the side and try to get somebody's attention, and then, ultimately being right there in the interface. And so that's what you're talking about, right? Is really understanding for that particular company, what are those moments, mindsets, and mediums that people need to have the right engagement, interaction, and being existing customers. And arguably, you could use this also for new customers or new folks that you're trying to connect with as well.
Exactly.
What are some of your, outside of email, what are like some of your favorite use cases, not use cases, but kind of like tools and sort of channels that mostly get underutilized or just kind of completely overlooked?
Yeah, I mean that in-app use case or channel is, I think, gonna start really pulling market share from email, if you will, when it comes to existing customers. That's sort of one of my predictions for 2025. It's already becoming a lot more popular, and I think the evolution of technology over the last couple of years enables a lot more products to be able to do that, just like tactically on the back end and technically.
Yeah.
So I think we'll see a lot more of that this year, and it's one of my favorite ways to engage with customers. Again, the whole point here, we're talking about a customer who's already purchased from you. Okay, the ultimate goal is to try to get them to stay a customer and grow with you. Well, if they're not using your product, they're probably not going to do that, right? And as marketers, we think about like, hey, how do we reach our customer or our potential customers where they are? This is such a good example of that. You want them to be in your product, using your product. You also probably know that there are particular features in your product that if a customer is using that, it makes it extra sticky, right? It makes them more likely to stay and or to grow. So how can you guide them in the product to that particular feature, right? Or if we're talking about like early on in a new customer relationship with implementation and onboarding, it's really powerful there, so that you can get customers through those initial setup steps on their time when they want to, right? The information is at their fingertips. And then you can get them really closer to receiving value from the product, which is the only reason they're going to stay or grow. Another one I really like, I'm actually seeing a lot more automation like through Slack for B2B customers, right? In a similar way that you would do like an SMS message in a B2C environment. Slack is a really interesting channel for that in B2B, particularly, again, just like I just said, you want to meet your customers where they are. Hey, do they live in their Slack channels with their coworkers all day? Well, what easier way is there to get a hold of them, right? So that's another one I think we're going to continue to see more of. That one's a little more controversial, just like text message is a little controversial. People can get a little funny about it sometimes.
Yeah.
So I think you got to be careful with that and make sure that it really is like not a marketing message, right?
Yeah, that people don't want to be marketed to in their work, Slack environment. But you even got me thinking a bit about when I thought of Slack, I thought of the customer success manager being notified, and I'm sure obviously that's a part of this as well, right? Is this is not just about streamlining things for the customer. It's very much can be streamlining it for the internal, right?
Absolutely. Huge component, right? We think about, okay, as marketers, we're used to having some sort of lead flow set up to pass leads to sales, right? And notify sales in some way. There are 5 million options for how to do that, but that's not a foreign concept to any of us. So exactly, just like you just said, there's that internal automation as well. Hey, when does the CSM need to be notified of an action that a customer took, like submitting 50 support tickets, or non-action? When does the CSM need to be notified if this customer hasn't logged into your product in 2 weeks, right? When does that become a red flag? When does a CSM need to be notified that they need to pick up the phone and call a customer? How about, even scheduling reminders? If you're doing quarterly business reviews, can you automate the reminder to schedule that? All of those internal automations are huge time savers as well, that, back to my earlier point, make room and make time for those more strategic actions, strategic conversations.
So you've got to be keeping your eye at the moment on agents, AI agents at the moment. This is something where we're working in the space right now. And is that something, that you have been keeping an eye on? And, what are your thoughts on it? And does it excite you? Because all as you're describing all of this, my brain just keeps thinking of these workflows and the more complexity that could be added to the work you're already, recommending. What's your experience or thoughts on that?
Yes, AI is obviously a super hot topic everywhere. This space is no different. There are a ton of new technologies coming out specifically for like more of a customer success or customer marketing use case with AI. Some of the existing customer success platforms are coming out with new features and functionality that utilize AI. Turn Zero is one of my favorites. They have actually, their AI agent is especially good at those like internal notifications. It can be just like really smart about ingesting customer data and notifying internal resources as needed. There are all sorts of new ones that I like cannot keep track of the names for the life of me. Number one, because there are so many. And number two, because I feel like brand new companies like come out with a name and then they change it. And I'm like, that's number one, very confusing. You should have picked a better name in the first place.
I was like, Turn Zero, that's kind of a cool name considering. You were saying Turn Zero. I was like, oh, okay. Like you get it exactly what it is. It's not
They've been around forever. They're one of the fantastic customer success platforms out there, but this AI functionality is brand new.
Okay.
And they're all in. Their CEO is like all in on AI, which I love. Very forward thinking. And I think we're going to continue to see additional new AI products, but also other existing products, even particularly that are new, adding AI, right? Because I think the reality is if you're not talking about AI, if you're not demonstrating AI in your product, like you're not going to get funding, you're not going to get customers. Like everybody wants AI right now. So I think we're just going to continue to see that like amp up and up and up and up. I think for me, the important thing is that, when we're saying AI, we're talking about more than just like a chatbot, right? Like,
I love the way you said that. You were like, the chatbot's been around for so long. They're not sexy anymore unless, there's so many, it's interesting to understand. You can almost always tell somebody's understanding of AI or how much they know at that moment, given by the example. I was talking to somebody. I was at a wedding this weekend, and there was a group of young guys who were like, "What do you do?" And then we were talking about AI and all this, and they go, "Oh, it's really cool to like create some ad copy or whatever." And I was like, honestly, my perspective is if you're using this to create content, like just to write something, you are using it for the most boring thing that it should be used for. I was like, there's so much additional potential here. And so to your point, right, like how long have we had chatbots? For a while, and it's really cool to kind of, they're much more dynamic when you could utilize generative AI components to them and give them knowledge and do all this stuff. But it is, again, kind of like the lowest common denominator loose use case in a lot of ways. But even to your point of what you just described, right, is I like paying attention to things that impact customer behavior and expectation. Mm-hmm. And so we as marketers have to always pay attention to those things that currently are almost always associated with technology in some way, whether that's messages and memes and things that are streaming along the internet on that technology and that move at the speed of light, and how those affect, customers buying certain things or impressions of things, but also their usage of technology and tools, like what you just described. Was like, well, people are so used to using AI now in their iPhone, even though Apple Intelligence is very underwhelming at the moment, or Chat GPT, they're going to have an opinion on how antiquated or not your tool is going to feel,
right,
or how much effort it takes to get an answer. Man, why do I gotta go through clicking all these pages just to get my answer when I could just go to ChatGPT and do X, Y, and Z? And the unfortunate part is you find a lot of folks are relying on the foundational LLMs to provide answers to things that technically they don't actually know yet because they're trained on a finite amount of information, and
Right.
and even the ones that are connected to the internet are doing an okay job of pulling that data and giving you accurate results. So we've got folks that are changing their behavior but not updating their understanding of the accuracy and reliability of that information that they're getting. But if you're doing something in a more localized way, to your point, and you're doing it smart, and you have a guide such as yourself to help you do that, then you're fine tuning that information to what that customer really needs, and then meeting them in the way that they're going to continuously be expecting, given the world we live in now with AI.
Yeah, like the other day, I was talking to a founder who has an existing product, and he was telling me about how they're thinking about incorporating AI into the product. And he was telling me, so their product is all about like defining customer value and helping customers track to outcomes and value. And, you know, great product in and of itself. But he was like, we're getting more and more questions about, hey, how are you using AI? And his idea, I was like, this is genius. Like, I loved it. His idea was like, hey, a lot of these companies that we're talking to, they're like, I mean, yes, we want to help our customers track to their definition of value, but like, we don't know what the definition of value is, and neither do they. So the AI is going to be like help them define value based on XYZ customer data and information. And I was like, that's brilliant. Exactly to your point. Like, it's such a narrower use case, but then it's so much more accurate versus this like big, broad, entire universe of everything. Where, you know, last week I asked ChatGPT to tell me about one company acquiring another company, and ChatGPT literally said, like, as of my knowledge, this has not happened yet. And I was like, that was like a year ago.
Yeah, yeah. And most people are not aware of it, right? They just jump in and they start using something and they don't understand. Because I remember even this person at the wedding was like, yeah, you know, can you recommend a chat GPT on steroids? And I was like, well, what do you mean? Like, what does on steroids mean to you? And it was like, well, I feel like I don't really get these good answers when I'm doing this and that and the other. It's like, no, you're not wanting chat GPT on steroids, because chat GPT technically is considered one of the top solutions out there. What you're talking about is either narrowing things down to give you what you want, because you're asking somebody that, you ever talk to somebody that is extremely intelligent and you ask them a question, and instead of answering that question as simple as they probably could, they're like trying to, you could see their brain sifting through all of the permutations of what they know in their brain, and even almost verbally talking through it before they finally get to something, or they're just giving you just too much to chew on. But they normally want something either that's more narrowed down, or something that obviously is focused on giving web connected results, like a Perplexity or something, which also still has, you know, it's more reliable, but not perfect as well. So it's interesting what we'll see happening, and I think it's going to impact that space that you're in. And it's good to hear that you're on it. What is, outside of that, what is the thing that is like you're most looking forward to, or the most exciting thing here in 2025 on Marley's mind?
Most exciting. I mean, I talked about sort of some of the channels I expect to see more of. I talked about AI. I mean, in general, I just really think what I do and this concept of engaging digitally with existing customers is going to continue to become more and more prevalent. Again, I think most companies are just going to need to meet that new customer expectation, which I think is becoming more and more prevalent, right? If you're buying something in the B2B space, if you're buying a new B2B software, you expect to be able to get the answers that you want when you want them, right? Maybe that's at midnight when you're working and nobody from the company is. And so I think it's just going to become a lot more table stakes. If we talk a year from now, I think there are going to be a lot more people out there like me who are focused on this concept, focused on these existing customers and how to engage with them, through digital channels, through automation, but without losing that human touch, without losing that sense of connection.
That's awesome. Well, at the tail end of the podcast, I always give folks an opportunity to ask me one question before we wrap things up. We've talked enough where there may be absolutely nothing, but I'm leaving that on the table before we end here. Is there anything you would ask me?
Well, now I want to know what your prediction for 2025 is. Or predictions. What do you think is going to come of the next year?
Don't put an S to that. That could be very dangerous. When I was talking, about all those things swirling around people's heads and trying to narrow it down, I was thinking of the way I answer things sometimes. But so one of the ones that I don't think is being talked enough about, which is just one of some of my predictions, is that the website is going to become less and less. It's not that it's less and less important. It is to some extent, but proper marketing is going to mean that you're not going to be seeing as many people coming and visiting your website.
Yeah.
More folks are going to get the answers they want where they want them, just like you said. And that also means if you're going to build up a relationship with them, that relationship is not going to be built up on your blog. That relationship is going to be built up through your social profiles. It's going to be built up through the places that people hear about you through other human beings. To some extent through the media, like your ads or something may also continue to communicate and tell your story, right? I think it's often undervalued, the progressive storytelling through advertising, where people, to your point, want to go after, let's get at conversion. Let's sell that person. It's well, you have a billboard and you're driving down the road and you see that billboard, which is very akin to seeing a display ad. You don't always have that moment to click and take action, but I can see it, and you've now gotten that 1 second or 2 seconds to put something in my brain. Let me, now that if I keep driving down that road and I keep seeing that billboard or a related billboard, I start to build up something in my consciousness around that brand. You could utilize those touch points in order to continue to build up an awareness, an affiliation with a problem and a solution, and so on. And the website will become a place ultimately people will come, but they'll come for a lot less than they're coming for right now. And I believe that having an embedded chatbot, honestly, but an LLM driven chatbot on that website is something that is going to be an expectation. Why? If I'm coming to your website, why do I got to go find the page that I'm looking for or find the answer that I'm looking for? Why not give me the answer and then say, by the way, if you want more info about this, go to these pages. Or, if you've got a website, you can just as easily add that as knowledge to an AI powered chatbot, and then get folks what they need that fast. And imagine the precedent that helps, that sets with your customers of, oh, these folks, they value my time more than their own. They got me right to that answer. They made the experience really streamlined and easy. It just sets a good precedence for what could happen once somebody signs up for your service. So that's one of the biggest things that I think is going to increasingly happen over this year. And I think actually in 5 years, somebody said this interesting thing. I'll end this with this podcast I was listening to, TED AI, which is really interesting conversations with high level folks in the AI space in general. And there's this concept of, I forget what they call it, zero internet or the invisible internet. And it's something around that eventually 5 years, 10 years, 15 years from now, that we will use the broadband to get information and to engage with people, but we won't be using the internet to go to a web page for something or go here. We'll be using that to just transfer the data of, I have a question. Great. Here's my answer. I want to connect with my folks on social. Here's how it goes. And so I just think that that's the trend that's going to start right now, is this diminishing use of static web pages to provide value to your customers any longer. It will become the final destination for a lot of things, but it will continue to diminish in its value over time as people find what they need elsewhere.
I'm sensing a theme between what you just said and what I just said. It's all about doing everything on your customers' terms. It's not about
Yes.
us as a company, right? It's about them, their terms, their expectations, their needs, their wants.
It's following, like you said, right? Expectations and behaviors. Yep, for sure. Marley, I love talking to you. Where can people follow you around and stalk you a bit online?
Find me on LinkedIn. I think I'm the only Marley Wagner out there. So just search me for me. Would love to chat with anybody out there. Clearly, I love having these kinds of conversations and always great to talk with you, Adam. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you.